Welcome to Code Your English, the home to learn and grow fast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Code Your English, the channel where we use real topics, real psychology, and real conversations to help you think, speak, and communicate in English at the highest level. I am so glad you're here today. Whether you are joining us for the very first time, or you have been part of this community for a while, welcome. This is your space. A space to grow, to reflect, and to discover that learning English is not just about grammar rules and vocabulary lists. It's about learning how people think, and how you can express those thoughts clearly, confidently, and powerfully. Before we dive into today's episode, I want to take just a moment to say, if you are finding value in this podcast, please subscribe to the Code Your English channel. It truly makes a difference. Leave a comment, share the episode with a friend who is learning English, and follow along so you never miss a new episode. Your support helps this community grow, and I am deeply grateful for every single one of you. Now, let's get into it. Because today's topic? It is one of my absolute favorites. It touches on communication, psychology, emotional intelligence, and something we have all experienced at one point or another. Today, we are talking about arguing. More specifically, we are talking about why you should sometimes choose not to argue at all. The episode is called Never Argue with Stupid People. And yes, that title is deliberately provocative. But stay with me, because by the end of this episode, you will understand that it is not really about stupidity at all. It is about something much more important. Let's begin. Let me ask you a question, and I want you to really think about this one. Have you ever won an argument and still felt like you lost? Maybe you proved your point. Maybe you had all the facts on your side. Maybe the other person had no logical response left. And yet, somehow, you walked away feeling tired, frustrated, even a little dirty, like the whole experience had drained something from you. I think most of us have been there. And if you have, then today's episode is going to make a lot of sense to you. Picture this. You are in the comments section of a video online. Someone has posted something that is factually wrong. Maybe they have misunderstood an event, or they are spreading information that you know is incorrect. So you respond, politely. You offer facts. You provide evidence. You explain your position clearly. And they come back at you, not with evidence, not with a logical counterargument, but with more noise, more aggression, more repetition of the exact same point, as if saying it louder will somehow make it more true. So you try again. You stay calm. You are patient. You rephrase your argument. And still, nothing changes. You are going in circles. The conversation is going nowhere. Or maybe it is not online. Maybe it is at work. A colleague who refuses to accept feedback, no matter how respectfully it is given. Maybe it is at home. A family argument that never seems to resolve itself, that comes back every few months, like a storm that never fully passes. We have all been there, and in all of those moments, there is one voice in the back of your mind that is quietly asking, is this actually worth it? Now, there is a quote, often attributed to the American writer Mark Twain, though its exact origin is debated, that goes like this: never argue with stupid people. They will drag you down to their level and beat you with experience. When people hear that quote for the first time, they often laugh. It is clever. It is sharp. It has a certain dark humor to it. But here is the thing. I think most people misunderstand what that quote is actually saying. Because this episode is not about intelligence. It is not about looking down on others or feeling superior. It is not about dismissing people who disagree with you. This episode is about something much more practical. It is about learning to recognize unproductive conversations and making a conscious choice to protect your time, your energy, and your peace of mind. There is a wonderful expression in English: a losing battle. A losing battle is a fight you cannot win, not because you are weak, but because the conditions for winning simply do not exist. And one of the most important communication skills a person can develop is the ability to recognize when they are fighting a losing battle, and to step away before it costs them too much. There is also a phrase I want you to note: to get dragged into something. When you get dragged into an argument, you did not plan to be there. You did not choose it freely. You were pulled in, often before you even had time to think. And that is what happens in these situations. We get dragged into conversations that serve no purpose, and we waste precious energy. Energy that could have gone somewhere far more valuable. So the key vocabulary for this section, which I encourage you to write down or replay: futile, having no useful result; pointless, irrational, not based on logic or reason; productive, achieving something useful or worthwhile; emotional investment, the mental and emotional energy you put into something. Hold on to those words. We will be coming back to all of them. And now, before we talk about what to do in these situations, we first need to understand something deeper. We need to understand why intelligent, thoughtful, reasonable people keep getting trapped in pointless arguments in the first place. Why we feel compelled to argue. Here is a truth about human beings that we do not always like to admit. We are deeply, almost desperately, driven by a need to be understood. Not just agreed with, not just praised, but understood. When someone says something that is wrong, especially something that directly contradicts our experience, our knowledge, or our values, something activates inside us, a kind of alarm. And the voice attached to that alarm says, "No, that is not right. I need to correct this." And the reason that voice is so loud is because being right, for most of us, is tied to something deeper than information. It is tied to our sense of competence, our self-worth, our identity. Think about it. When someone challenges a belief you hold, it does not just feel like a disagreement about facts. It can feel like an attack on your judgment, on your intelligence, on who you are as a person. That is why we argue. Not just to win, but because losing the argument, on some level, feels like losing a piece of ourselves. There is also something called the ego's desire to correct misinformation. When we encounter something false, something that we believe is genuinely harmful or misleading, there is a moral impulse that kicks in, a sense of responsibility, an inner voice that says, someone needs to address this, and that someone is me. This is not a bad instinct, by the way. The desire to seek truth and correct misinformation comes from a good place. The problem is that this instinct does not always check whether the conversation is actually going somewhere productive. And behind all of this, there is a hidden belief that drives so much unnecessary conflict. A belief so common that most of us never even question it. If I just explain it better, they will finally understand. How many times have you thought that? How many times have you rephrased an argument, tried a new analogy, added more evidence, absolutely convinced that this time they would get it. And how many times did it actually work? This belief, that clarity leads to agreement, is completely logical on the surface, but it runs into a wall when the other person is not actually looking for understanding, when they have already decided what they believe. There are two psychological mechanisms at work here that are worth knowing. The first is confirmation bias, the tendency for people to seek out and accept information that confirms what they already believe, while dismissing information that challenges it. It is not unique to anyone. We all do it to some degree. But in a heated argument, it becomes almost impenetrable. The second is ego involvement, the degree to which a belief has become part of a person's identity. When a belief is highly ego-involved, changing that belief does not just feel like updating your thinking. It feels like a threat to who you are. And people will do extraordinary things to protect who they are. The key vocabulary here: validation, the experience of feeling accepted, understood, or confirmed. Perception, the way you interpret and make sense of the world around you. Assumption, something you accept as true without checking it. Bias, a systematic tendency to lean in one direction when thinking or deciding. And here is the reflection question for this section. One I would genuinely invite you to sit with. How many times have you continued an argument not because it was useful, but simply because you wanted to be understood? Be honest. I think for most of us, the answer is more times than we care to admit. But not every disagreement is a bad disagreement. Some conversations are genuinely worth having. The challenge, and this is one of the central skills of communication, is knowing the difference. The difference between a debate and a dead-end argument. Let's be honest about something important. The goal of this episode is not to tell you to avoid all conflict. That would be bad advice. Disagreement, when handled well, is how ideas improve. It is how relationships deepen. It is how society moves forward. A productive debate is a beautiful thing. Two people, or two groups, with different views, genuinely engaging with each other's ideas. Listening, questioning, challenging, and sometimes changing their minds. So what makes a debate productive? A productive debate has certain characteristics. There is curiosity, a genuine interest in understanding the other person's position, not just waiting for your turn to speak. There is mutual respect, a shared understanding that the other person has the right to hold their view, even if you disagree with it. There is openness to evidence, a willingness to update your position if the facts support it. And there is a willingness to listen, not just to respond, but to actually hear what is being said. Now, contrast that with what I would call a dead-end argument. In a dead-end argument, there is constant interruption, not because the person is excited, but because they are not actually listening. There are personal attacks, moments when the argument shifts from the idea to the person. You always do this. You never understand anything. The problem is people like you. The moment an argument becomes personal, it stops being about truth and starts being about dominance. There is also a refusal to consider facts. Not a disagreement about the facts, but a flat refusal to even engage with them. And there is what debaters call moving the goalposts, where every time you answer one challenge, the other person shifts to a completely different challenge, as if the original point never existed. I love the analogy for this one. It is like playing chess with someone who keeps changing the rules. Every time you make a strong move, they quietly redefine what counts as a valid move. You can never win. not because you are playing badly, but because the game itself has been rigged. So how do you tell the difference? How do you know, in the moment, whether a conversation is worth engaging? Here is a practical framework. Ask yourself 4 questions. Number 1, are they listening? Not just being quiet while you speak, but genuinely processing what you are saying. You can often tell by whether they respond to what you actually said, or simply repeat their original point. Number 2, are they curious? Is there any sign that they are interested in your perspective, or are they already certain about everything? Number 3, is there any possibility of changing minds, either yours or theirs? Not that it has to happen, but is it possible? Is the door even open? Number 4, is this conversation moving forward? Not in circles, not backwards, but actually progressing towards something? If the answer to most of these questions is no, you are in a dead-end argument. And one of the most powerful communication insights I can share with you is this. You cannot reason someone out of a position they did not reason themselves into. Read that again. If a person adopted a belief not through logic, but through emotion, experience, identity, or tribal belonging, then logic is not going to be the thing that changes it, because logic was never the thing that created it. That leads us directly to our next section. Because if logic often fails, why does it fail? And what is actually happening when it does? Why logic often fails. We like to think of ourselves as rational beings. We like to believe that when we form opinions, we are doing so based on evidence and careful reasoning. That we are logical, objective, fair-minded. And on a good day, in a calm environment, with low stakes, maybe we are. But here is the uncomfortable truth that psychology has shown us, again and again. Most of us are not as rational as we think we are. In the heat of a disagreement, emotions move first. The brain's emotional response, the part that registers threat, that activates defensiveness, that decides whether you are in danger, fires before the logical, reasoning part of the brain even gets involved. And what does logic do after that? In many cases, it does not actually evaluate the argument. Instead, it defends the emotional response that already happened. It becomes a lawyer for a verdict that was already decided. This is called post hoc rationalization, the process of constructing logical-sounding reasons for a position you already hold emotionally. And it is far, far more common than most people realize. The key concept here is identity protection. Many of our beliefs, especially the ones we care most deeply about, are not just ideas we happen to hold. They are part of who we are. Our politics, our religion, our career choices, our parenting philosophy, our sense of which group we belong to. When you challenge a belief that is tied to someone's identity, their brain does not process it as, here is some information that might help me update my view. It processes it as, I am being attacked. And when people feel attacked, they do not become more open. They become more defensive. This is why emotional reasoning is so powerful and so dangerous. Emotional reasoning is when feelings become evidence. When I feel strongly that this is true starts to function as proof that it is true. When emotion becomes the primary filter through which information is accepted or rejected. And then there is cognitive dissonance, one of the most fascinating concepts in psychology. Cognitive dissonance is the discomfort we experience when we hold two contradictory beliefs at the same time, or when reality conflicts with something we deeply believe. And what do people do when they experience that discomfort? Do they update their beliefs to match reality? Sometimes, but often, far more often than we would expect, they do the opposite. They reject the reality in order to protect the belief. Imagine someone who has followed a certain diet for years, convinced it is the healthiest way to eat. They have told their friends about it. They have persuaded their family to try it. It has become part of their identity. And then a comprehensive study comes out showing that the diet actually has some significant health risks. What do they do with that information? If their identity is strongly attached to the diet, there is a very good chance they will dismiss the study, find reasons it is flawed, or simply stop following the news about it. Not because they are unintelligent, but because accepting the study would mean accepting that something central to their identity was wrong. And that is painful in a way that goes beyond logic. The insight here is powerful and humbling. People rarely change their minds because of facts alone. Facts matter. Facts are essential. But facts rarely change minds by themselves. What changes minds is connection, trust, timing, emotion, and identity. When people feel safe, when they feel respected, when they do not feel that their entire sense of self is under attack. And perhaps the most powerful line I want you to take from this section. Facts speak to the mind, but identity speaks to the heart. And in most deep disagreements, it is the heart that is making the decisions. So when logic fails, when your careful, well-evidenced argument bounces off someone like a tennis ball off a wall, it is probably not because you explained it wrong. It is probably because the conversation has become about who they are. And no argument, however brilliant, is going to resolve that. The vocabulary for this section. Rationality, the quality of being based on logic and reason. Resistance, the refusal to accept or comply with something. Perception, the lens through which someone sees and interprets reality. Contradiction, a situation where two things conflict with each other. And here is the reflection question. Have you ever ignored evidence? Not because you did not understand it, but because accepting it felt uncomfortable? Most of us have, and recognizing that in ourselves makes us far better at understanding it in others. The hidden cost of pointless arguments. Let's talk about cost, because every argument has one, even when you win. When you engage in a genuinely pointless argument, a dead-end conversation with no possibility of progress, you are not just spending time. You are spending something far more precious, mental and emotional energy. And unlike money, you cannot earn that back with extra hours of work. Think about what actually happens after a frustrating circular argument. You feel exhausted, not physically, but mentally drained in a way that is hard to describe. Your thoughts keep circling back to the conversation. You replay what was said. You think about what you should have said. You feel a low-level hum of irritation or frustration that lingers for hours, sometimes days. That is not just unpleasant. It is costly. Because while your mental energy is tied up in that argument, while you are still replaying that moment in the comments section, or that meeting at work, or that dinner table conversation, you are not present for the things that actually matter to you. The costs of pointless arguments are real, and they accumulate. Mental exhaustion, the slow drain of constantly being on the defensive. Stress, the cortisol spike of conflict that does not resolve. Damaged relationships, the small fractures that form when communication becomes combat. wasted time, hours that could have been spent creating, learning, connecting, reduced focus, the inability to concentrate on important work because your mind is elsewhere. There is an analogy I want to offer. Imagine you are going on a long walk, a journey that matters to you. And at the start of the journey, someone invites you to put stones in your backpack. Not heavy boulders, just small stones. And you say yes, because each one seems manageable. But as the journey continues, the backpack gets heavier. Your pace slows, your energy drops. By the time you reach the places on your journey that actually matter, the views, the moments, the experiences you set out for, you are too tired to enjoy them. Those stones are the pointless arguments. Each one, in the moment, feels worth carrying. But together, they weigh you down far more than you realize. Social media battles are perhaps the most obvious example. We have all seen them, threads that spiral into hundreds of comments, where no one changes their mind, no one walks away satisfied, and the only result is a collective increase in frustration and anxiety. Family disputes that recycle every few years, the same argument, the same positions, the same unresolved emotions, are another. And workplace conflicts, where two colleagues cannot agree, and the disagreement slowly poisons the atmosphere for an entire team. Here is the insight. The goal is not to win every argument. The goal is to spend your energy wisely. And here is the reflection question for this section. And I want you to sit with this one genuinely. What opportunities are you missing while fighting battles that cannot be won? What could you be building? What could you be learning? What relationships could you be deepening? What projects could you be completing? What moments could you be fully present for? If your energy was not being consumed by a conversation that was never going anywhere, the good news is that there are better ways. There are smarter, more effective responses to these situations. Responses that do not require you to either cave in or fight back. Let's talk about them now. 5. Powerful alternatives to arguing. So we have established the problem. We understand why we argue. We know the difference between a productive debate and a dead-end conflict. We understand why logic often fails, and we see the cost of engaging in battles we cannot win. Now the question becomes, what do you actually do instead? Because just don't argue sounds easy. But in the heat of the moment, when someone says something that challenges your values, your expertise, or your sense of truth, the instinct to push back is powerful. Knowing that something is unproductive does not automatically make it easy to walk away. So here are 5 powerful alternatives to arguing. Real, practical strategies that you can begin using immediately. Strategy 1. Ask questions instead of attacking. The moment we feel challenged, our default response is to make a counterstatement, to push back, to say, "No, that is wrong, and here is why." But there is a far more effective approach. Ask a question. Questions are powerful for a very specific psychological reason. When you make a statement, you create a battle. Each side has a position, and defending that position becomes the goal. But when you ask a question, you invite reflection. You lower defensiveness. You shift the dynamic from combat to conversation. Instead of saying, "That is completely wrong," the evidence shows, try asking, "What makes you think that?" Or, "That is interesting. Where did you come across that information?" Or, "I am curious. How did you come to that conclusion?" These questions are not sarcastic. They are genuinely curious. And they do something remarkable. They invite the other person to examine their own thinking. Often, when people have to articulate and defend a belief under gentle questioning, they begin to notice the gaps in their own reasoning. Not because you pointed them out, but because the question created the space for them to discover it themselves. And if they cannot answer well, that says more than any counterargument you could have made. Strategy 2. Don't reward provocation. Here is a truth about conflict that many people do not fully appreciate. Some people are not arguing to reach a conclusion. They are arguing to get a reaction. Provocation is, in many cases, a form of emotional need. Some people feel powerful, seen, or stimulated only when they generate a strong response from others. In online spaces, this is called trolling. In real life, it looks like a colleague who constantly disagrees, a family member who reliably brings up certain topics, or an acquaintance who seems to enjoy making others uncomfortable. When you respond with emotion, frustration, anger, anxiety, you give them exactly what they are looking for. You reward the provocation. But silence? Silence is a different kind of power. There's a phrase I want you to remember. Not every invitation deserves acceptance. Being provoked is an invitation to conflict, and you have the right to decline that invitation. You are not required to respond. You are not obligated to explain yourself. You are not bound to justify your silence. The next time you feel provoked, before you type that response, before you open your mouth, pause and ask, am I responding because this serves me or because they triggered me? That pause alone can save you enormous amounts of energy. Strategy 3. Agree where you can. This one surprises people, especially those who associate backing down with weakness. But finding common ground is not backing down. It is strategic communication. Here is how it works. When someone makes a point, even a point you fundamentally disagree with, there is almost always something in it that has some truth, or that you can at least understand from their perspective. If you can find that thing and acknowledge it, you do something powerful. You remove the urgency of the conflict. You signal that you are not the enemy. You reduce tension. Try phrases like, I can see why you might think that. That makes sense from a certain perspective. I understand where you are coming from. These are not admissions of defeat. They are demonstrations of emotional intelligence, and they often, not always, but often, create just enough of an opening for a real conversation to begin. Strategy 4. Know when to exit. This is perhaps the most undervalued communication skill there is. Walking away is not weakness, it is wisdom. It is the recognition that your time and your energy are valuable, too valuable to pour into a conversation that has no exit, no resolution, and no benefit. There is a cultural myth that walking away means you lost, that silence means you had no answer, that choosing not to argue means you are conceding the point. But think about it from the other direction. What kind of person needs to win every argument? What kind of person cannot let a disagreement go? What does that say about their emotional state? The person who can walk away, calmly and clearly, that person has something the other person does not. Self-control. Useful expressions for this moment. I don't think we're going to agree on this one, and that is okay. Let's agree to disagree. I think we're going in circles. Let's leave it here. I don't think this conversation is going anywhere productive for either of us. These are not dismissals. They are dignified exits, and they model something that is rarer and more valuable than winning: emotional maturity. Strategy 5. Protect your peace. The final strategy is perhaps the most important of all, and it is less of a tactic and more of a philosophy. Your peace of mind is a resource. Your attention, the quality of your focus, your presence, your mental energy, is one of the most valuable things you have. It affects your work, your relationships, your creativity, your health, your happiness. And every pointless argument is a withdrawal from that resource. Protecting your peace means setting boundaries, not as acts of aggression, but as acts of self-respect. It means choosing, consciously, where you invest your attention. It means asking yourself, before engaging, is this person, in this moment, worth this amount of my energy? Sometimes the answer is yes, and when it is yes, engage fully, generously, with everything you have. Because some conversations are genuinely worth the investment. But when the answer is no, when the conversation is circular, when the other person is entrenched, when no real progress is possible, then protecting your peace is not selfish. It is strategic. Your attention is one of your most valuable resources. Spend it like it matters, because it does. The most powerful mindset shift. We have covered a lot of ground today, and all of it leads to this: what I believe is the most important shift in thinking that this entire episode has been building toward. Most of us, when we find ourselves in an argument, are asking one question: how do I win this? How do I prove my point? How do I make them see what I see? How do I come out of this conversation with the upper hand? And I want to invite you to replace that question with a completely different one. What outcome am I actually trying to achieve? That single shift from winning to outcome changes everything. Because once you ask that question, you might realize that the outcome you actually want is not to win the argument. Maybe the outcome you want is to preserve a relationship, to get a project approved, to help someone understand something important, to feel heard, to protect your reputation, to move a team forward. And here is the uncomfortable truth: winning an argument is often completely separate from achieving any of those outcomes. In fact, winning an argument often makes those outcomes harder to achieve, because when people feel defeated, they do not become more cooperative. They become resentful. They do not update their beliefs. They dig in deeper. Think about a manager who wins every argument with their team. They may have the most logical position. They may be technically correct in every instance, but if their team feels overruled, dismissed, and unheard, that manager is not leading. They are dominating, and the performance of that team will reflect it. Think about a marriage or a long-term partnership. If one person consistently wins the arguments, if they are always right, always the one who gets their way, what happens to the other person? They shrink. They disengage. They start to feel not like a partner, but like a subordinate. The most effective communicators are not the ones who win every argument. They are the ones who choose their battles wisely, who know when to stand firm and when to let go, who prioritize the relationship over the point, who understand that sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing. And that brings us to the most memorable idea I want you to carry out of this episode. Maturity is not winning every battle. Maturity is choosing the battles worth fighting. Sit with that, because choosing your battles requires something that is genuinely difficult. It requires knowing what you value. It requires a clear sense of what matters to you, what is worth your energy, your attention, your emotional investment, and what is not. And that self-knowledge, that clarity, that is not something you are born with. It is something you develop through experience, through reflection, through mistakes, and through exactly the kind of conversations we are having right now. And so we come back to where we started. Never argue with stupid people. They will drag you down to their level and beat you with experience. I hope, after everything we have explored today, that quote lands differently for you now, because it is not, as it might appear, a call to arrogance. It is not a license to dismiss anyone who disagrees with you. It is not a statement about intelligence. It is a statement about recognizing the limits of certain conversations. The person in that quote is not described as stupid because they are unintelligent. They are described as stupid in the archaic, almost poetic sense of the word, meaning stubbornly fixed, unwilling to move, impervious to reason. Not because they cannot understand, but because they have decided not to. And the real wisdom in that quote is not about the other person at all. It is about you. It is a reminder that engaging with someone who has decided to be immovable does not change them. It changes you. It brings you down. It drains you. It pulls you into patterns of communication that do not reflect who you want to be. Let us bring together everything we have learned today. We feel compelled to argue because we need to be understood, and because our beliefs are often tied to our identity. That is deeply human, and it is nothing to be ashamed of. But not all arguments are created equal. Productive debates have curiosity and mutual respect at their core. Dead-end arguments have neither. Logic often fails because most deeply held beliefs are not the product of logic. They are the product of emotion, experience, and identity. And those things do not yield to facts alone. Engaging in pointless arguments has a real cost. To your mental energy, your relationships, your focus, and your peace of mind. There are better alternatives. Asking questions, refusing to reward provocation, finding common ground, knowing when to exit, and protecting your peace. And the deepest shift of all, stop asking how to win, and start asking what outcome you are trying to achieve. Because at the end of the day, life is not a debate competition. It is not about winning the most rounds. It is about building something. Relationships, ideas, careers, communities that lasts. And you cannot build those things while you are busy fighting battles that were never going to take you anywhere. So let me leave you with 3 reflection questions. And I genuinely encourage you to take a few minutes with these. Perhaps after this episode, perhaps in a journal, perhaps in a quiet moment before you sleep tonight. First, which argument in your life is draining your energy right now? Where are you currently fighting a losing battle? With a person, with an institution, with a belief that is costing you more than it will ever return? Second, what would actually happen if you simply stopped? Not surrendered, not gave up, but just stopped investing your energy in that particular conflict. What would be different? What might you feel? Third, where could that energy go instead? What would you create, build, or become if you redirected that resource toward something that actually matters to you? Those are the questions worth sitting with. And here is the closing message I want to offer you. Your words are powerful. Your attention is valuable. And one of the greatest communication skills you can develop is knowing when not to speak. That might sound like a small thing, but in practice, it is one of the most difficult skills there is, and one of the most rewarding when you begin to master it. Thank you, from the bottom of my heart, for spending this time with me today on Code Your English. I hope this episode made you think differently about communication, about psychology, and about the way you invest your most precious resource, your attention. Because here is what I believe about this work we do together. Improving your English is not just about learning new words. It is about learning better ways to think, better ways to connect, better ways to communicate, in English and in life. Every episode of this podcast is designed with that in mind. Real topics, real psychology, real language. Because language is not just a skill, it is a superpower. And the more clearly you can express your thinking, the more powerfully you can shape your world. So if today's episode resonated with you, if it gave you something to think about, something to try, something to share, then please subscribe to the Code Your English channel. It is completely free. It makes an enormous difference to the growth of this community, and it ensures you never miss an episode. Leave a comment and tell me, which section today hit home for you the most? Was it the psychology of arguing? The 5 alternatives? The mindset shift? I read every single comment, and I genuinely love hearing your thoughts. Share this episode with someone who is learning English, or with someone who needs to hear this message today. You might be surprised how many people in your life are quietly fighting battles they cannot win. And if you want to keep growing, if you want to take your English to the level where you can discuss ideas like these with confidence, clarity, and depth, then stay with us. Code Your English is here every week, ready to help you get there. Until next time, take care of your energy, choose your battles wisely, and remember, you don't always have to win the argument. Sometimes, the most powerful move is simply to walk away. See you in the next episode.